Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes a big stack of sources and boils it all down to the essential knowledge you need. Today, we're getting into a book that really, it changed how entire governments think about our behavior. It's the 2008 classic, Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein.
It's a huge one.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack their two big ideas, libertarian paternalism and choice architecture. We want to trace how this whole field of behavioral economics went from academia straight into global policy.
And by the end, you'll have the shortcut. You'll understand the science behind so many of these systems designed to, well, to guide you.
Right. And what's interesting is that the book wasn't really groundbreaking in its original research. It was more of a synthesis, wasn't it?
Exactly. It pulled together decades of behavioral science into one practical framework. And its main target, its core challenge, was aimed at this bedrock assumption of mainstream economics.
That humans are always rational.
That humans are always rational actors. Yep.
So to really get Nudge, we have to understand what they were pushing back against. This traditional school, neoclassical economics, it was all built on this idea of the perfectly rational person. What did that mythical person even look like?
Well, they gave him a name. They called him an econ.
An econ?
An econ, yeah. And this person, this econ, operates with just flawless logic. Thaler and Sunstein have this great quote where they say, "Econs can think like Albert Einstein, store as much memory as IBM's Big Blue, and exercise the willpower of Mahatma Gandhi."
So they never procrastinate. They always save the perfect amount for retirement.
They never eat the junk food. They are, for all intents and purposes, perfectly rational machines.
Which, is not how most of us operate day to day.
Not at all. And that's where the work of these two Israeli psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, was so critical. They provided the foundation for what Thaler and Sunstein called the human.
The rest of us.
The rest of us. And the key insight from Kahneman and Tversky is that our irrationality, it isn't random, it's actually highly predictable.
Predictably irrational.
Exactly. We don't always use logic. We use mental shortcuts, what they call heuristics. And those shortcuts lead to consistent, predictable errors, biases.
And these biases are basically the engine for the whole idea of a nudge.
They are everything.
Okay, so let's make this real. Give us a couple of examples of those biases from the source material, because they really highlight the difference between an econ and a human.
Okay, a perfect one is the availability heuristic.
Yeah.
It's the tendency to judge how likely something is by how easily an example comes to mind.
So if you see a bunch of news reports about a plane crash,
you start to overestimate the risk of flying. Even though, statistically, it's incredibly safe, or say your neighbor just had a heart attack, suddenly you might feel like your own risk is much higher just because that example is so fresh and available in your mind.
Right. And what about with our money? That's an area where the idea of the econ just completely breaks down.
Oh, absolutely. That brings us to loss aversion. The research on this is so clear. The pain of losing, say, $100 feels about twice as powerful as the pleasure you get from gaining $100.
An econ would treat those as equal, a 50-50 proposition.
Exactly. But a human will work much, much harder to avoid the loss than to secure the equivalent gain. It explains why we hold on to losing stocks for way too long. We just hate to crystallize that loss.
And the timing of this book, it couldn't have been more perfect, really. It comes out in 2008.
Right as the global financial crisis is hitting, and all of a sudden those mainstream economic models that assumed everyone was rational,
They looked kind of foolish.
they were heavily criticized. Yeah, they completely failed to predict the crash. So this crisis created a vacuum. Policymakers were suddenly very open to the idea that maybe people aren't always rational, and they needed new tools. Nudge gave them a set of those tools right when they needed them most.
Okay, so that sets the scene. We have established that we are humans, we are predictably irrational. So the next logical question is, how do we design the world to help us make better choices?
And that question leads you directly to the concept of choice architecture.
Choice architecture.
It's a simple but powerful idea, basically that whenever you make a decision, you're making it inside an environment. And someone designed that environment. That person is the choice architect.
It could be the person designing a website, a government form.
Or the famous example from the book, a cafeteria manager.
Right, the cafeteria manager who puts the salads and the fruit at the beginning of the line, right at eye level.
Exactly. They aren't banning the cake, but they're designing the environment, the choice architecture, to make the healthier option the easier, more obvious one.
And that specific design choice, That is the nudge.
That is the nudge. The book is very precise about the definition. A nudge alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing their economic incentives.
Okay, so the key part is that it has to be easy and cheap to avoid.
That is the absolute key. Putting fruit at eye level is a nudge. You can still easily grab the cheesecake.
But banning the cheesecake.
Not a nudge. Taxing it at 500% is not a nudge. Those are mandates or significant economic incentives. This distinction is what leads to the, let's say, the central philosophy of the whole book.
Which is a phrase that sounds like a complete contradiction.
Libertarian paternalism.
Libertarian paternalism. It sounds like an oxymoron. I mean, libertarianism is all about freedom, and paternalism is about someone else deciding what's good for you.
It does sound like one, but they argue it's a reconciliation of two facts. The paternalism part just acknowledges that, like it or not, choice architects are always influencing us, so they might as well try to influence us for our own good.
Okay, so where's the libertarian part come in?
That's the commitment to preserving freedom. You structure the environment, you nudge people toward the better choice, but you must always leave them free to opt out, to choose differently. It's suggestion, not a mandate.
And the classic perfect example of this is retirement savings plans. The shift from opt-in to opt-out.
The flagship example, absolutely. Before nudge, the default was usually that you had to actively sign up for your company's pension plan.
And a lot of people just never got around to it.
They never did. So the paternalistic part is making enrollment automatic. That's the default. But the libertarian part is that you are completely free at any time to fill out a form and opt out.
And this taps directly into which human bias. Just our basic inertia.
Exactly. The power of the default. We stick with the path of least resistance. And just by flipping that default, automatic enrollment has had a massive impact on retirement savings.
The book also had that brilliant program for getting people to save more over time, the one that tackles procrastination.
The Save More Tomorrow program. It's genius. It lets people commit to a future action, so you agree today to increase your savings rate.
But it doesn't actually happen until your next pay raise.
Right, so the pain of a smaller paycheck is delayed, and it's cushioned by the gain of the raise. It perfectly engineers a solution around our natural tendency to put things off.
It's fascinating. And another big one was mandated choice.
Yes, for something like organ donation, instead of opt-in or opt-out, when you go to get your driver's license, the form forces you to tick a box. Yes, I'll be a donor, or no, I won't.
It makes the decision unavoidable.
It does. It closes that gap between what people say they want to do, most people support organ donation, and their failure to actually do it.
So once this stuff is in the book, it just takes off. This wasn't just an academic text. It became a policy playbook all over the world.
And across the political spectrum, which is really interesting, Thaler and Sunstein kind of pitched it as a third way in politics. It's not big government regulation, but it's not pure free market either.
And the UK's Conservative Party jumped on it almost immediately.
Almost immediately. In 2010, they set up the world's first government nudge unit, officially called the Behavioral Insights Team.
Which is pretty incredible for a book that was only 2 years old. The U.S. followed a bit later, under Obama in 2015. But, I mean, did they actually work?
Oh yeah, they worked. Because they focused on these low-cost, high-return interventions. A great example is tax collection.
Okay.
The UK Nudge Unit ran experiments. They changed the wording in the letters sent to people who were late on their taxes. Instead of a threat, they added a sentence that used what's called a social norm.
So what did the sentence say?
Something simple like, 9 out of 10 people in your town pay their taxes on time.
So you feel like the odd one out.
You feel like you're deviating from the norm, and that single, tiny, basically free change brought in millions of pounds in extra revenue really fast. It proved the concept worked in the real world.
Yeah, so that brings us back to the psychology. How do these nudges actually work on our brains? You mentioned heuristics, but the book goes deeper into the two systems of thinking, right?
Right, it relies heavily on Kahneman's model. You have the automatic system, which is fast, instinctive, emotional. It's your gut feeling. It's what makes you swerve to avoid a pothole.
And then there's the reflective system.
Which is slow, conscious, deliberate. It's the part of your brain you use to solve a math problem. It's the system that econs are supposed to use all the time.
But humans don't.
Humans don't. So nudges work primarily by appealing to the automatic system. They don't ask you to do the hard work of reflection. They just make the better choice feel like the easier, more natural choice for your fast-thinking brain.
And this is maybe the most subtle but most important argument in the entire book, the idea that governments are already nudging us all the time, even if they don't mean to.
Yes. Choice architecture is unavoidable. The way a form is designed, the default settings on a website, these things are already influencing you. A form that defaults to you not being an organ donor is a nudge, just a poorly designed one.
So the argument is, since we can't avoid it, we should be intentional about it. We should design these systems for better outcomes.
Exactly. It completely reframes the debate. The question isn't if the government should influence you, but whether that influence should be random and accidental or deliberate and helpful.
Okay, but a book this big, one that's about the state and the citizen, it was always going to get some serious pushback. What were the big critiques?
They mostly fell into two buckets. The first was that it was just too paternalistic, no matter how you dress it up with the word libertarian.
Where did that fight really play out?
A lot of it was around financial regulation after the 2008 crisis. There was a proposal to require banks to offer a simple, easy-to-understand, vanilla mortgage product.
To protect people from predatory loans.
Right. But critics, some really big-name economists, argued that even that was too paternalistic, that forcing simplicity onto the market would stifle competition and innovation.
That sophisticated buyers who want a complex product might not be able to get one.
That was the argument, yes, that you'd end up making some people worse off by limiting choice.
But Thaler and Sunstein had a response to that, right?
They did. They argued that offering a simple vanilla option doesn't restrict choice. It creates a baseline. It gives the average human a clear point of comparison, making the market more transparent, not less.
Okay, so what was the second major line of attack?
That nudges are too superficial, that they're just trivial, that you can't nudge your way out of a major recession, or solve climate change, or fix systemic poverty.
The house is on fire, and you're handing out nicely worded notes about fire safety.
That's a good way to put it. This critique said these big problems need big tools, heavy taxes, strict regulations, massive government spending, all the things that libertarian paternalism says you shouldn't do.
And did the authors agree with that?
To a degree, yes. They conceded that nudging is not a sufficient approach for the biggest problems. They never claimed it was a silver bullet. But they maintained that even for big problems, nudges can still play a helpful role as part of a larger solution.
Since the book, the whole field has sort of broadened out. We hear less about behavioral economics and more about behavioral science or behavioral insights.
That shift in language is really important. It acknowledges that this isn't just about economics. It's about psychology, sociology. It's about legitimizing all the social sciences and policymaking, which was traditionally dominated by economists.
And maybe the biggest legacy of this whole movement isn't any single nudge, but the method they championed for testing policies.
The focus on evidence, yes. The embrace of things like randomized controlled trials or RCTs, that's the gold standard in science.
So instead of just assuming a policy will work, you test it.
You test it rigorously. You send one version of a letter to 5,000 people and another version to a different 5,000, and you see which one actually works better. It forces a kind of scientific honesty onto government that just wasn't common before.
So if we pull this all together for you, the listener, Nudge really made the case that because we're predictably irrational, the world around us, the choice architecture, needs to be intentionally designed, and that we can be guided or nudged toward better outcomes in a way that still protects our freedom. That's the libertarian paternalism part.
And its lasting legacy might actually be that focus on scientific governance, using real evidence from RCTs to make sure that policies aren't just based on theory, but on what actually works for real humans in the real world.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to chew on. If nudges work best by targeting your fast, instinctive, automatic system, not your slow, deliberate, reflective system, does being successfully nudged make you a better decision maker? Or does it just make you a better guided one, protected from your own biases without ever having to consciously overcome them? Something to think about.